Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate, a show where we talk about the changing world around us and how we can make it better. Brought to you by Climate Change Realty. The only real estate brokerage that donates 50% of its net commissions to 501c3 nonprofit organizations dedicated to fighting climate change. Hi, Faye. Really nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on my show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Ethan. It's great to be here.
Absolute pleasure every single week. And of course, we always love to get this show started with a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the moment.
Cool. So, hi, my name is Faye. I use they and she pronouns, and I am the co-executive director of the Post-Landfill Action Network. We're a small nonprofit. We work across the country with about 800 college campuses on student leadership and zero waste. My journey into this work is kind of a long and winding road, but began when I was a student and working on waste issues on my own campus. I was actually like the recycling worker. And so I walked around campus picking up recycling bags around campus and became fascinated just by what people threw away, the systems on campus, how people kind of interacted with stuff. And as I dug deeper into that, I began to realize our relationship with stuff has so much to do with the way that we structure our society, and the issue with waste and planned obsolescence and environmental racism is one of the major contributors to climate change. So that really, I became what I now call a trash nerd. So that really informed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, I mean, you literally dug deeper. You would like go and like siphon through like trash and see what people were throwing out, right?
Yes, yeah. I definitely did that.
Where did this like inspiration come from? Where are you like from originally? Is your parents interested in like recycling or any of that stuff? Or did it just kind of come about because you're like, wait, like how does this system work? Kind of thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I would say my parents. I think I was the one who was like really trash nerding out. Um, but I think the inspiration really came from I first got involved in a lot of like social movement work. So I was doing work around um, like civil rights and social justice and trying to kind of understand the way that systems of oppression were present in our society. I worked with like Students for Peace and Justice in Palestine, Amnesty International, a couple other groups, got my hands in like all different kinds of social and environmental justice work in like middle and high school. And then I started to dig into waste and began to kind of make a connection between so many systems of oppression that exist around the world and our stuff and the way that like stuff is created and distributed and then thrown away. And I started to realize that a lot of the conflict that we have is around resources and around resource control and distribution. And so that's really what got me to waste is I see it as a vital component of addressing systems of oppression beyond just like the stuff that we have in our lives.
Right. So we're going to dig into waste for the rest of the podcast, but I kind of just want to press on the oppression topic a little bit. So I'm like a
Mm-hmm.
cis white man. I don't really feel very oppressed. So can you kind of like what are these systems of oppression that you're referring to? How do they work and why do they exist? If we all kind of, we want to all live happy lives, why is oppression happening to begin with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of it is exploitation, right? So the society that we live in, um, we produce stuff. We extract resources from the ground. We make stuff. We distribute that stuff. People buy that stuff, and then we throw stuff away. And throughout that entire what we call linear consumption economy, um, some people are getting rich and making a lot of money, and some people are often being taken advantage of and ending up getting paid nothing or low wages in really dangerous work environments. We see this in factories all across the world that end up creating fast fashion. We see this in communities that are experiencing the extraction of resources or pipelines. And it's so often folks who have like multiple kind of systems of oppression happening, right? They're not receiving resources, they're being kind of systemically refused resources and then being taken advantage of by having these institutions that are polluting and that release chemicals into the air and into the water and into the ground. And that is sometimes called a sacrifice zone. So our economy, our like make, take, break economy, is so reliant on being able to just pump out stuff,
Hmm.
and that is dependent on exploiting communities and individuals. So that's when we talk about the kind of intersections of systems of oppression in waste work specifically. That's kind of what we're talking about, right? We're talking about folks who um, are living near incinerators or landfills, and are kind of suffering the impact of the like level of consumption of our society.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I don't want to go on about this too much because we can get really deep on oppression, but is that economic system not just supply and demand of labor where skilled labor gets paid more and unskilled labor gets paid less? I'm not saying that it should be one way or the other, but is that not just how like general economics works? And would we want to like reformat that? Like what? Yeah, I just a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I'm not an economist, but you are correct. That is how our economy works, and that's why the linear consumption economy. That's the problem, right? The economy is built to rely on that. So something that we want to see, and some folks like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation does a lot of really great research around the implementation of circular economy, and that is the direction that we want to start heading in.
That's zero waste, right? Circular economy.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, let's dive in.
Yeah.
What did you learn about like waste management when you were going like studying abroad and going to a bunch of different countries? How it works there compared to like the U.S.
Yeah. So a little bit of background on that. I had the incredible opportunity when I was a junior to do a program called the International Honors Program Beyond Globalization. And so I traveled in Washington, D.C., Tanzania, India, New Zealand, and Mexico. And each of those places, I kind of dug into some of the waste systems, and not just waste, but also kind of like production systems, understanding the globalized aspect of this linear consumption economy. And the, we could have a whole long conversation about that, but I really think that like a lot of what I saw and started to understand was something we've already really touched on, which is like the folks who are dealing with the global waste system um, are experiencing like incredibly toxic living environments and incredibly toxic work in order to uphold this like global consumption of resources at a really, really unsustainable rate. Um, so I think a big thing that I learned is that like none of this can be confined by borders. So much of the systems of waste management are global, and you can see like walking around a landfill in Ahmedabad, India. You will see like Trader Joe's packaging that could have come from like down the street in Center City, Philadelphia, and that that kind of like global waste trade um, is heavily contributing um, to the impact of climate change and the impact on like individuals' lives. And so much of this stuff is just not going anywhere. You know, like that Trader Joe's package is going to take a long, long time to break into smaller pieces, and it really will never go away.
I have an interesting question for you. Do you think that this overgrowth or like consumption economy came about because of population growth, or do you think population growth came from us overproducing stuff, like the chicken and the egg question?
That's a really interesting question. Um,
Just something came up in my head.
yeah, I think it's probably a like a mutually beneficial relationship. You know, the like steps of stuff and people and stuff and people. Yeah, I think it wasn't one or the other necessarily.
No, do you have a personal like position on like population growth?
I don't know.
It's a tough one. Yeah, it's not sure. But cool. Let's get into like what you're an expert on. And I wanted to ask you about what role you think universities have to play in this transition to a
Mhm.
zero waste economy.
Cool. Yeah. So as I said, I started my work in student organizing myself as a student. I started a fossil fuel divestment campaign on my campus, and got to see and be a part of what it looks like for like student power to really grow and impact a movement. Um, and I got really interested in understanding like the way that social movements have grown in the past. And you can look at so many social movements and see the impact of students, right? Like we had in the civil rights movement, we had SNCC, which organized the Alabama bus boycotts and the lunch counter protests. We had the Vietnam War, so much student activity around anti-Vietnam War work. South African apartheid, students were a major part of ending South African apartheid through divestment. Um, and for waste, I think that we have kind of a unique opportunity not only to address movement growth and to kind of build skills and um, build up like resources and tools for folks who are interested in participating in the movement, but we also have kind of a unique opportunity when it comes to waste systems. So the way that I think about it is like um, enclosed systems, and obviously campuses are not enclosed. So going a little bit deeper, right? Have you ever been to like a big football stadium?
A couple times. Not a big sports guy
Yeah,
over here.
yeah, me neither, you know, but major sports stadiums, they're usually like pretty um, on top of managing the stuff that comes in and out of the stadium, right?
Is that an
Um,
example of an enclosed system, like a sports stadium?
Exactly. Yeah, so you can get kind of like really specific when you get into a sports stadium. Most campuses have stadiums. And in those stadiums, you can be really conscious of saying, no one's allowed to sell styrofoam or straws or plastic bags. And everything that comes into the stadium, we need to have a very clear waste management system for how it goes out, right? So we have to be able to have all of the stuff be compostable, or we can have reusable dishware systems within a stadium because everything is staying in that enclosed system. So then we kind of back up a little bit to a college campus where obviously it's not nearly as enclosed as a stadium, but you're able to kind of measure and test out these different programming. Like you can test out a campus wide reusable mug system where there's like mug vending machines. And instead of getting a disposable cup when you go to your local coffee shop, you get a reusable cup. And then you go to class, and right outside class, there's a vending machine, and you drop off your dirty cup. and then that cup gets brought back and cleaned and reused. And so these kinds of like reuse and compost systems allow us to cut down on the disposable like dynamic that we have we rely on often in our kind of like go 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 society, and then we can try these things out and then apply them to communities. So there's this really uh, great tool of utilizing the resources and the structure and the energy and the kind of innovative spirit of campuses to test out solutions, and testing out what it looks like to have um, folks with different like needs and expectations and familiarity with systems and interest in participating be a part of these systems, which is a good model for communities.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like one corporation or idea that like started in a campus and got large widespread adoption, and the only example I can come up with is Facebook. But it's a great example
Mm-hmm.
because it started with college. It didn't even start, it started with, I think it was just like Harvard, right? And then it spread out to
Yeah, I think
like
so.
Boston, and then now it's this giant global phenomenon. So that really worked. And a couple of the early adopters are like, this is going to be a big thing. That's really interesting. I was trying to think of another one. So what, tell me about, what is your project? What is plan? Like, how did you get started? What, I mean, we kind of hinted at what you guys are trying to do, but like, let's give like the introduction. Like, what is plan?
Yeah. Um, I actually I want to back up too and
Back
address
it up.
the project started on campuses because I've got a couple of examples that are folks that we actually work with. So I'm like,
Thank you.
wanna promote them too. One is Borreo skateboards, which as students, this group came together. I believe they were Northeastern University students,
Mm-hmm.
and they came together and figured out a way to make like frisbees and skateboards and even Jenga sets out of recovered fishing nets. So that is now like a full business because fishing nets are often made of plastic.
Yeah.
So they were able to recover the fishing nets and melt them down and turn them into all this cool stuff. They make sunglasses as well. That was a student project, and now it is a full blown company. Um, there is Scrap Dogs Compost, which are some students from um, NYU who were working on compost on their campus. And then when they moved, it's actually in Rockland, Maine. When they moved to Maine, they decided to carry on the expertise, the tools, the skills that they learned as students. And now they run a community composting program. And there's so many examples of that kind of work. One of my favorites, which actually isn't a business, but um, is students from University of Santa Barbara were able to ban microplastics, microbeads on their campus. So
Huh.
if you're not familiar with microbeads, because they are now banned nationally because of these students, a lot of like face washes or toothpastes, a lot of the like exfoliating stuff would have tiny, tiny little particles of plastic in them. And that's what they would use to exfoliate your skin. And some toothpaste had them in it, which is probably not very good for you. But, and all of that stuff after you used it would get washed down the drain and into our waterways, which is obviously a really bad thing. And students were able to ban that on their campus and then make that ban a California ban, and then it is a national ban. So microbeads are not allowed in our products at all now because of the student work that kind of expanded beyond their campus.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. And that last example was really awesome. But I guess what I was getting at was, of course, amazing ideas start on college campuses and then spread out to the rest of the world. Like, for example, Steve Jobs went to college, he dropped out, whatever. But what I was like curious about is like, if you really think that college campuses are good model communities for large scale adoption of ideas, because I kind of see colleges or universities, as they're called around the world, as like glorified like sleepaway camps where people pay lots and lots of money and they're surrounded by all like similar people to them. Whereas when you go out to certain communities or cities, like it's totally different. There's like, it's not really like supply and demand. It's like people are paying in and the government subsidizes people to go there. Yeah, just a little bit on that.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely not exactly the same as communities, and that's kind of why I see them as like a step rather than like the final implementation.
Definitely. Cool. All right. So what's plan? What's your project? How did you
Yeah,
get started with it? All that stuff.
yeah. So the Post Landfill Action Network or Plan, we have a staff of 10 full-time people. And we just entered our ninth year. So we're 9 years old right now. Um, we were actually started in 2014 sorry, 2013 from a student project at University of New Hampshire, and grew to be able to support students across the country in running zero waste programming on their campuses. So the kind of work that we do is supporting students in basically having the like tools and resources that we wish that we had had when we were students trying to do this kind of work. So we make manuals that cover all of the ins and outs and pros and cons of different decisions and best practices around everything from student run thrift stores and free stores to composting to um, move out projects. And students can use those tools to implement programs on their campuses. We also have like a variety of programs that will allow students to kind of connect with each other and connect with like-minded folks to share solutions and create like community and skill sharing, because a lot of times um, there's not a ton of community on each individual campus who's interested in this work. So it helps to have this like cross collaboration, helps to keep students from having to reinvent the wheel every time they want to do a program. Um, so we have a variety of different programs. Do you want me to get into the programs right now?
Do it. Absolutely. I'd love to
Yeah.
hear it.
Cool. So we have our membership system. So campuses can become members of our network. And when a campus is a member, they have access to all of our tools and resources. Actually, every student on that campus has access to our member hub, which contains all of the manuals. We have over 300 pages of digital manuals that folks can come in and read all about different programming. We have a digital leadership certification that teaches students the ins and outs of campus organizing. So everything from like how to run an effective meeting to how to talk to campus administration, to how to create petitions or campaigns or kind of the basic skills that students need to know to organize. That's our Beyond Waste Leadership Certification program. And then we also have partner discounts. So we work with a select group of partners who, for-profit companies who we feel like are helping to kind of support the movement, and folks that campuses, typically students organizing on their campus, need the supplies and resources from to provide discounts to our student members. So maybe that is like reusable water bottles or upcycled reusable bags, and students can put their campus logo on it and get it for a discount and then distribute it on their campus. Um, and so that's our membership system. And then we also have a couple of like specific programming. One is our Break Free from Plastic program and our campus pledge. And Break Free from Plastic is actually a global coalition of organizations working to address plastic production and use across the world, and disrupt the supply chain around single-use disposable plastic specifically. Um, and we manage the campus pledge aspect of that. So we have a very specific pledge where campus presidents sign on to commit their campus to getting rid of single-use disposable plastic over a certain time period. And through this pledge, we really try to take into account accessibility measures. So making sure we're not um, removing tools and resources that maybe folks who have rely on single-use packaged plastics for food access or for disability reasons. We try to take into account ensuring that this is an accessible program for everyone, and that we're not kind of creating a problem by trying to solve a problem. And so that pledge has been, at this point, I think, signed by like 15 to 20 campuses, somewhere in that range. And just this past year, we had 100 active campaigns working on getting that pledge signed on campuses. Um, and then we also have the Atlas Zero Waste Consulting arm, where we work even closer with campuses and we do waste characterization studies. We have this what we call a 360 assessment, where we analyze all of the ins and outs of campus waste, everything from the dining halls to the art studios to the horse barns to like every single piece of it. And we give campuses ratings based on their current structure and recommendations for how to improve. And this is a three-stage project. So the first stage, which is actually the characterization study, is completed by current students who are paid to do this work. And then we convert that into a report. And then the second stage, we work with the campus to create a zero waste task force and create a plan for actually implementing the changes. And then the third stage is where we work with them on implementation. So that project is really hands-on. And then additionally, we have all of our events. And we do a series of events. Typically, they're in person, but for the last year and a half, we've been doing a lot of digital events. Just last year, we did 65 digital events over the course of the year. And we're actually coming up to our biggest digital event in just a couple of weeks, which I can talk about in a second. But before I
Yeah.
do, yeah, do you have anything you want to ask about?
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that. Well, I think it's amazing that you guys, I have, yeah, two things. I think it's amazing. First is, did you and your team create all of these projects from like scratch, just like brainstorming?
Um, to an extent, yes. So I joined Plan um, a little bit less than a year in. So I'm actually not one of the founders
Oh,
of the organization, but I have been with the organization since the first year. And we have a team structure that really encourages folks to have ownership over their projects. So the way that the projects are now have been created by both the current staff and the like all the staff who have been involved through the years. But they're all unique projects. We've built them all from the ground up as the generations of plan staff.
that is amazing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
one thing I'm thinking about how it would be great, easy to, or not easy because nothing's really easy, but effective for spreading ideas is I'm imagining it's quite, effective to like cross pollinate between universities, right? When you're talking to
Yeah.
other universities, they love to adopt the ideas. No.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of our model. Um, and universities can be kind of like feed into competition. And so we try to break that down a little bit and
How
make
so?
opportunities. Competing to see who's the like greenest school
Oh,
or
that's
who
funny.
has the best program or things like that. But um, we really approach this from a movement perspective and want to take into account the fact that like we need to be it's we don't have time to compete when it comes to climate change. We need to be collaborating. We need to be sharing resources. Um, we just don't have the time to not address the impact of our consumption and just like disposal of resources.
For sure. So when it comes to like organizing all these different projects, like what does your day-to-day kind of workflow look like, and how do you kind of convert sustainability into operations, you know?
Yeah. So I am one of two co-executive directors for the organization. It's myself and Sierra, who was supposed to join us today, but unfortunately was not able to. And um, we have probably the most boring jobs on the team. We do a lot of the budgeting and the document editing and the grant writing and the kind of back end insurance and all that stuff, making sure we're keeping everything up to date. But the structure of the team is that we have um, a pretty like democratic structure where folks are able to um, really take ownership and like make decisions around their own projects. And the way that we have built the team is an attempt to break down some of the like normal structure of nonprofits, recognizing that like I said, the issue of climate change, it's looming, right? Like it's on our doorstep. We're seeing the impacts of it, the wildfires, the floods, like we're seeing it happen right now, right here. And that can be really anxiety provoking. And something that we try to do within the organization is balance sustainability within the structure and the expectations of our staff with the sustainability of our programming. So we try to incorporate lots of staff benefits. We've actually changed our like full-time structure from a 40-hour work week to a 35-hour work week.
Cool.
Yeah, which is really nice. We have flexible work structures. We've really tried to encourage folks to take time off and to not work on weekends when we don't have to, and to like kind of turn it off and take a break because we have a long way to go in this work, and it's really important that we can go the distance and that we're not burning ourselves out. So that's not only something that we incorporate into our operations, but it's something that we try and help teach the students that we work with, because that can be really exhausting to be a student and sometimes have a job and be organizing and be told that like you're the future, and feel the weight of that. So we try to make sure that we're encouraging the students that we work with to take a break and take it slow and do what they need to take care of themselves, and ensure that they have the tools to be as effective as they can be, so they're not like making mistakes and making things take longer than they have to. So we try to really like thread that through every piece of our programming.
I think that's really awesome. Yeah, people first. You can't go wrong. It's all about that
Mm-hmm.
long-term vision. If people burn out, they're not going to be as effective. But that's really cool. That's
Mm-hmm.
something we could talk about off the show at another time. But I hear, what is this I hear about an event you got coming up?
Yeah, so we have our Students for Zero Waste conference. It is November 5th through the 7th. And this event is, we've been doing it since 2014, every year. Last year we took a break, sadly, because of COVID, but we're bringing it back this year. We bring together around 500 students and organizers from all across the country. And it is global. We have folks from all over the world really attend and present at this event, um, to talk about the future of the movement. And it is the largest gathering for Students for Zero Waste in the country. It's, I think, probably the largest zero waste movement event in the country annually. And the content is what we see as like the kind of growing edges of the movement. So we have panels where folks are able to talk about everything from dealing with single-use disposables on plastic to the relationship between capitalism and zero waste, or what it means to build resilient communities, or mental health and the zero waste movement. Um, so we really try and hit as many of the different topics as we can. And along with that, we have opportunities for folks to get connected with each other. So that's a really big part of this event. And typically in person, we do things like having like trips where folks can go visit facilities that are doing cool upcycling projects. Or we do a drag show called Waste is Such a Drag every year. And this year with the digital format, we're gonna incorporate the music, we're gonna incorporate the networking and the connecting, and it's gonna be different, but we're trying to use the tools, the digital tools that we've all gotten so familiar with now to actually increase the amount of connection that folks can have. Um, so it's going to be a blast.
Sounds like
November
fun.
5th to the 7th. Yeah, it is a sliding scale of tickets. So tickets, you can pay up to the full cost of a ticket, or you can join us for free, whatever works. And we're really excited for it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It sounds like it's a lot of fun. Where is it usually physically happening?
Yes, we did the first 4 years, I believe, in New Hampshire, and
Hmm.
then the last 3 years in Philadelphia.
Very cool. So one thing I want to ask you is you're clearly a very deep thinker and you're a systems thinker and you're trying to analyze the way the world works and trying to isolate something, specifically waste, and fix it. Something I deal with that's difficult for me is when I'm working on climate action is I talk to lots of people on the show and I hear people talk about environmental racism and systematic oppression and all these large scale issues with our society. Do you find it difficult to kind of, I don't want to use the word conflate because that seems like it has like a negative connotation, but when you're pulling a million different facets of society into a way to fix one issue, do you find that like difficult? Because for me, I'm like trying to find like a simple, it's not simple, it's not easy, you can't just hit one input and fix climate change, but I'm trying to find a way to be focused and direct with my actions. I wanted to just ask you about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, and um, I have kind of two answers to that question. The first answer is when I think about that question, I think about movement history. And a lot of times when we look at the history of movements, something that we see is an attempt to create solutions without taking into account the the like level of complication of the problem. It actually creates more problems, and that's a pretty common um, issue, is like the creation of problems in an attempt to create solutions. And so that's one of the reasons that I think it's so important to actually lean into the intersectionality of this work. Um, a really great resource. So the term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and she has a couple of really good resources where she talks about why, like, what intersectionality is and why it is so important to movement building. And I would highly suggest that as like a tool or a resource or something to check out. She has a couple of like really good videos.
Amazing.
Um, and then thinking about what it looks like as like an educator or as someone with an audience, something that we've done at Plan, because you're right, these things are complicated, and we don't always have, we live in the TikTok generation, right? Like folks need things like now, and it needs to be able to be like understood quickly. And so something that we try to do is build visuals. Um, So we have, I don't know, is it possible for me to like share my screen? Is that
Definitely.
something I could do?
Yes, yeah, you do that, go for it, and then I will kind of just
Cool.
try and, or you can could just describe what's on the screen as well. So like half of the people will see
Cool.
it, half the people are listening. So yeah, go ahead and pull it up. I'm excited to see what you got to show. Okay, cool.
Cool. Um, cool. So yeah, talking about visuals, right? So visuals are super important, and this is a visual that we created a couple of years ago to give folks something to grasp onto when thinking about the scope of this issue. So I'm going to describe this for folks who are just listening. Um, what we've created here is a visualization of the linear consumption economy, right? So I mentioned this earlier. We extract stuff from the ground. So we've got a pipeline. We produce it into stuff. So we've got smokestacks indicating refineries. And then we distribute that stuff. And then we consume that stuff. So going to big box stores, trucks to big box stores, and then we dispose of that stuff. We throw it away and then it goes to landfills or incinerators. And in our graphic, we kind of show how that thread moves along. And then the way that we think about change and actually what we call our theory of change as an organization is points of intervention.
Mm.
And in this graphic, we represent points of intervention by showing people resisting extraction, resisting pipelines, creating renewable ways of producing and redesigning stuff and kind of intervening, right, in extraction, intervening in production, intervening in the distribution and consumption process by reusing stuff, repairing stuff, recovering stuff, composting stuff, and then intervening in our systems of disposal by reclaiming communities that are often in areas where stuff is being disposed of and resisting that industry. So we show, and if you're just listening to this, if you go to our website postlandfill.org and you go to the About Plan page, you can see this graphic yourselves. But that's the visualization of how we see this being a systematic structure that we need to address at all of the points of intervention. And this is a tool we use in a lot of our educational resources because it's so helpful to kind of see when we're talking about change. You can see the problem, but you can also see what solutions might look like. And that I think makes it a lot more doable, right? Like if we just say we need to change the linear consumption economy, the question is like, okay, where do we start? Like, what does that even look like?
It looks
And
like
this
resist
graphic
would be a
attempts to
good
answer
place
that
to start.
question.
Yeah, like at the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think yeah, we need people starting there, but we also need people redesigning stuff and repairing, right? Like we need all of it all at once. So that's kind of the in the points of intervention theory, we talk about the idea that no one can do everything, but everyone must do something.
Ooh,
So helping folks find their point of intervention. So what like is reuse your point of intervention? That's great. Like it is one cog in this whole system.
totally. Yeah, well, so what's interesting is you've used colors here. You've used green and red to show the way
Mhm.
things are, green to show the way we can kind of redesign and make things better. Yeah, I guess that at the end here, I kind of wanted to talk to you about if you thought it was really even possible to create this regenerative economy based on the way we kind of live our lives now and what you know about anthropology. You studied anthropology, is that right?
Yeah, sociology and anthropology. I did. Um, yeah, that's the big question. Ending with the big question:
Is it possible?
is it even possible? um, yeah, I mean, I think that it's necessary, and it's not necessarily going to be easy, and it might not look exactly the way that we think it'll look, but the reality is the way that we are currently living, and the way that our systems are currently functioning is unsustainable. We live on a finite planet. We cannot continue to extract and produce and consume and dispose in this way anymore. It's just not possible. So it's not a matter of if it's possible. It's a matter of how the transition happens. Either it happens in a way that we use up all the resources, we totally trash the planet, lots of people end up getting like exploited and endangered in the process, or we do a what's called a just transition. We are intentional and we are sustainable and we implement changes that allow us to increase the standard of living for everyone. And I think that the question of like, is it possible is um, I hope so. I hope it's possible for us to do it in a way that is just, and that's what I've kind of committed my life, and so many other people have committed their lives to doing. But whether or not it's going to happen is not really a question. It's a guarantee. Uh,
Well, I asked you that question because I wanted to see what you said, but I'm absolutely certain that it's possible. I mean, if you observe the way nature works, like people have this idea that we are superior to nature, that we're different from nature. But if you look at the way nature works, they all work in reciprocity with each other. The fungi feed the trees, and the trees feed or give homes for animals. And we do something similar, but we've kind of taken it to a point where we use our logical minds to I don't even know what to call it, but it can be done because it is being done. It just might not being done well by us at scale. But Faye, yeah, it's been really great having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out. I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's really important to educate people about how they can do this stuff, and then targeting universities and showing people when they're at that stage where they're kind of first getting out into the world and experiencing what life is like, I think is really great, because that foundation will stay there forever. My last question I love to ask people is, what advice do you have for someone who's passionate about creating a more inclusive and equitable society? What can they do today, or what would you recommend they do?
yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here and talk about this stuff. And I think the advice that I would give is find your point of intervention. Find what you can do to get involved and show up. And I think beyond just what we can do in our daily lives, the best thing that we can do is to get involved in communities that are making change, and get involved in organizations and show up for community meetings. That can be the kind of on road to figuring out your point of intervention and the thing that you can really make change within. And one other thing that I will just put in here is that we do have a fundraiser right now. We're fundraising to make, yeah, we're fundraising to make, continue to make the conference free for member campuses. So if you go to our website, we would love it if folks donate. We have our general fundraiser. We also have our SCW fundraiser, which you can find on our Students for Zero Waste SCW page. But we always really appreciate that. We make a little money go a long, long, long way. And thank you so much for having me, Ethan. I really appreciate being here.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'll be sure to link all that stuff. And I think that graphic is really cool. Was that someone from your team, like an artist from your team, who made that?
It was. Yeah, that was our creative director, Genevieve DeGroot, a couple of years ago. We use that in a lot of our programming.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking the time to share that one as well, because that's really cool. I'll be sure to put that in the show notes or on the Instagram post or whatever. But Faye, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate what you're doing, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Same to you. Take care.
All right, everybody. See you next week. Peace. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Changing the Climate. Here at Climate Change Realty, we don't just donate 50% of our net commissions to fight climate change, we also donate a full 50% of our real estate referrals. So if you or anyone else you know is looking to buy or sell a home anywhere in the USA and would like to create thousands of dollars in donations without any cost out of pocket, please visit ccrboulder.com today.